So today, my name is Carol Grafford. I'm so delighted, happy to be here, to be your service leader today. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome. I'm delighted with how many people we have in the room. I thought with all the rain, we'd have a whole lot of folks online and 2 people in the room, the hospitality folks. So this is lovely, really lovely. I'm so happy we're here together. I'm assuming we are recording already. Thumbs up. Thank you, Davey. So I was, after the last time I spoke, someone asked me about, wait a minute, that sounds really individual. I thought we were all connected, and what's going on there? I don't get it. I don't understand. And so I thought, okay, today I'll talk about the relationship between the individual and the collective, between self and other, the piece of paper and the earth. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh teaches us to look deeply into a sheet of paper to discover all that is there. And I really love that way of sharing many Buddhist concepts of emptiness, interbeing, codependent arising, impermanence, non-self, lots of words that are really hard to take in, but a piece of paper can really, really help. And I thought I'd also throw in a cup of tea, a few atoms and quarks, and a sunrise, and maybe ourselves. So I'm going to share a little story that really happened to me. I don't know, maybe a month ago, maybe less. And this story is a felt experience story. So I was in my house, and it was cold, and I was cold, which is not uncommon. And I have an electric kettle, and I like tea, so I made a hot cup of tea. And I brought it into the living room, and I sat down, and I was holding my cup like this, which I do often. And in that moment, it just felt so good. That warmth. And I felt, I don't know, happy and loved or something. And I was holding my very favorite cup that my oldest grandson gave me. And I looked at that cup and, cup, you are so warm. Oh, thank you. You're making me warm, thank you. And the cup said to me, oh, Carol, I'm happy you're warm, but it really isn't me. It's this hot water inside me. Without the hot water, I couldn't help you be warm. And I looked, and that was right. And the hot water said to me, Carol, I'm so glad that you're feeling warm, but really, it was that kettle. I couldn't be warm, I couldn't be hot without that kettle. And I got up, and I walked in the kitchen, and I looked at that kettle, and I said, thank you, kettle. And the kettle said, well, you're welcome, but really, I couldn't do it without that electricity coming through my cord. And my brain followed that electricity. I looked at the wall, and I could see with my eyes shut this electricity coming from somewhere really far away. And in my mind, I saw a giant hydroelectric dam with water coming over, making electricity, making things hot, making this water. I saw a bizarre water cycle there. And it was a completely inclusive experience. I bonded with all of those things. You can't understand it. That would be rational. This isn't really rational. That's an experience of here and now and complete connectedness. I think I may have been standing in the Garden of Eden right that minute. So that was my experience. I'd like to share with you the piece of paper. I heard this many, many years ago from my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. He held up a piece of paper. Can you see the cloud floating in this piece of paper? I mean, we all know there's a tree in this paper, right? There's a tree in this paper. But without the cloud, there would be no rain, and no tree can grow without the rain. So if you're a poet, you can see the cloud floating in the piece of paper. And maybe you can see the earth and the minerals and the other organic beings that make up that soil that are in the piece of paper. But you know, there's a logger in this piece of paper too. Because if we didn't have a logger, nobody would cut the tree down and turn it into paper. So there's a logger in this paper, And there's wheat in this paper. Because the logger ate a sandwich for lunch before he did the cutting. And so the wheat that made the bread that's in the sandwich is in this piece of paper. And actually, the logger is married and his wife made the sandwich. And so she's in there too. And let's see, they both have parents, grandparents, and ancestors that they couldn't exist without those, so all those people are in there. I think the chainsaw is made out of steel, which is iron, which comes out of the earth, which requires a lot of people and machinery and stuff, and it's all in the paper. And if I think about the sun is in the paper, right? You can't have a tree without the sunshine. And, whoa, if I start thinking about the sun, the world gets really big. The cosmos gets really big because the sun does not exist just by itself. It is part of a much bigger, and if we just keep looking deeply, we will see there is nothing in the cosmos that is not in the paper. Except for paper. Because there's no essential essence. There might be a molecule we can call paper, but we can divide that further down. We can divide that into components, right? So it's empty of paper, but it's full of everything else. And that is Thich Nhat Hanh's beautiful way of describing emptiness. It sounds so negative to say emptiness, but in this way of thinking, it's fullness. The only thing it's empty of is a separate self, a separate identity. And you know, if that's true of paper, it can be true of about anything. Yeah, us too. So I'll throw in the match. If I chose to, and I'm not going to do that right now, but if I chose to, I could burn this piece of paper. And Thich Nhat Hanh would say, the piece of paper still exists after we burn it. It exists in other forms. It continues in other forms. Part of it would be light and heat, which are energy forms. Part of it would be smoke, which interacts in our air, our atmosphere. Part of it would be ash, minerals going back to the earth. All of those components go back to the everything, back to the collective, to the cosmos. So That is what they call impermanence. Okay? And if we look at a person and we say, oh, every one of my cells is changing every single nanosecond. I am not actually the same person who stood up here to speak today, because a whole lot of me is very different than it was before. Okay? And so that is the impermanence and the non-self, because whatever it is always changing. Always changing. Always, always, always changing. Never the same for a nanosecond. Even true of the piece of paper, even true of a rock. Always true. So I have this great book, or maybe not great book. It's called Calamity. It is a young adult book that my 17-year-old grandson is reading with me by Brandon Sanderson. And this is the third in a series of 3 about people with superpowers, most of whom the superpowers are evil. Okay? So our hero is a 19 or maybe 20-year-old young man, and he apparently does not have superpowers, but his girlfriend does. And her superpowers are actually not evil, and so that's good. So they're a team, right? But her superpower is that every time she dies, she pulls a different version of herself from another parallel reality, and that replaces her. And she's feeling kind of uncomfortable about having a serious relationship with our hero, because what if I come back and I'm not me? What if I'm dark-haired instead of blonde? What if I hate pancakes and you know that I love them? Or it's not me anymore. And he said, you are a sunrise. This kid loves sunrises. He lost both his parents, but he has a lot of fond memories of watching the sunrise with his father. He loves sunrises. I would watch the sunrise, and I would wish I could capture the moment, he says. And I never could. Pictures didn't work. The sunrises never looked as spectacular on film. And eventually I realized a sunrise is not a moment. It is an event. You can't capture a sunrise because it changes constantly. Between eye blinks, the sun moves, the clouds swirl. It's constantly something new. We are not moments, Megan, you and me. We are events. You say you might not be the same person you were a year ago? Well, who is? I'm sure not. We change like swirling clouds in a rising sun. The cells in me have died and new ones were born. My mind has changed. I don't feel the thrill of killing epics I once did. He's so different. I am not the same, David, and yet I am. I'm glad you're not the same, Megan. I don't want you to be the same. My Megan is a sunrise, always changing, but beautiful the entire time. I thought that was the most wonderful, beautiful expression of non-self in a very non-Buddhist book. Pretty awesome. And then I read about atoms and quarks in a Buddhist book. It's called Thunderous Silence. The author is Do Sung Yu. He's a Korean Zen priest. And he was talking about emptiness. And he then has a section on emptiness in science. The empty nature of all things is demonstrated in physics. Whatever the matter is, the object, it appears solid and compact and continuous. However, huge spaces exist between the molecules. The molecules are pulled toward each other by nuclear forces. A molecule is made of atoms. The atom is made of a nucleus and electrons swirling around it. There's an immense distance between the nucleus and an electron. If you use a hydrogen atom, for example, if we said the nucleus is as big as an apple, the electrons around it would have to be 16 miles away. If we removed all the space between the electrons and the nuclei in all the atoms of the Earth, our planet would become the size of a basketball. Why then does matter look solid and continuous despite the fact that most of its parts are empty? This is because light waves are not thin enough to enter into the empty space. So our eyes can't see at that level. We just skip over that. We just see something solid. The basic building block of all material things? That question has been puzzling scientists for thousands of years. Democritus, a Greek philosopher, called it the atom, meaning uncuttable or indivisible. But now we know it is composed of smaller parts. An atom's nucleus is made up of positively charged protons and electrically neutral neutrons, which can be further divided into minute particles called quarks. Quantum physicists have concluded that these minute particles exist without form. Their presence is only found through light and vibration. There is no fundamental building block at all. What is observed through supermicroscopes is not any substance, but rather dynamic patterns in a continuous dance of energy. When I read those words, I was thrilled. I'm sitting there, and I think I'm me, and there's no particles in there. There's no actual particles, no matter. And yet I'm there. It was a complete, and I know this news has been around a long time. I've read similar things before, and they never made any sense to me. I didn't quite get the lingo that the physicists were using. That didn't make any sense to me. But this guy, he put it together in a way that I could get. He says, as revealed by modern physics, form is a fixed entity is purely a concept, not reality. The reality is forming. When all the molecules dance together, it forms this, or that chair. When the energies dance together, it's forming what we call matter. Yeah. And so quantum physics shows that form does not differ from emptiness. To be there and to not be there are both true. Marvelous paradox, marvelous paradox. So the things I had hoped to share today. The piece of paper does exist. Sometimes you'll hear in Buddhist or other traditions that everything's an illusion. But you know, it does exist. Yeah, it does. And you do, and what you're sitting on does. It exists. It's just made out of everything except itself. Everything else is what made that. The individual exists. You exist. The individual has a role to play. The individual is built from and contributes to the collective. When I burn the piece of paper, it contributes to the atmosphere, to the heat around us, to the minerals in the earth. It contributes, if there's ink on it, to my consciousness. It has a role to play. The individual has a role to play. It is built from and influenced by the collective. And the collective, is built from and influenced by the individuals. The sun, the tree, you, the chair, everything. Everything. If I say we are separate, you and me, that's not quite correct because we're all made up of everything else. But if I say we are not separate, that's not quite correct either. We are separate and we are completely intertwined. Not two, not one. That's the Zen expression for this paradox. And if you can't wrap your logical, rational brain around it, hello, that's because it's a paradox. Our brains don't wrap around paradox. We just kind of have to, they're like a koan. We just have to kind of be with it until we say, oh yeah. But it probably wasn't up here that's going, oh yeah. We are everything and we are no thing. Everything and nothing. We are completely made from and bound to each other. We belong to each other. And as Bucky's going to tell us next week, we belong to the earth. We belong everywhere. Thank you for your mindful attention. I hope you find it useful. Time for a second.